I knew something in me had shifted forever the moment my wife held up that soft blue dress and whispered, "You don't have to hide anymore, not from me." My throat tightened so suddenly I could barely breathe. Like someone had thrown open a door I had spent my whole life leaning against. For a second, it felt like I was floating outside my own body, watching this strange little scene. My wife sitting cross-legged on our bed in Karachi, sunlight spilling across her hair, and me, her supposedly dependable, ordinary husband, frozen in the doorway, staring at a dress that was never supposed to be mine. The ceiling fan hummed above us, slow and steady, while my heartbeat battered against my ribs like it wanted to escape. "You're serious?" I managed, though my voice came out thinner than I expected, as if it belonged to someone younger, more fragile. Somewhere deep inside, a part of me reached out for that dress instantly, like a child reaching for a long-forbidden toy. But another part dragged me back with a familiar warning. "This is dangerous. This is ridiculous. This isn't who you're allowed to be." I gripped the doorframe so hard my knuckles hurt and tried to laugh it off, to make a joke, to be the man everyone thought I was. But she just watched me, her eyes calm and strangely bright, as if she was seeing something in me I had spent years avoiding. She patted the space beside her. "Come sit, Hassan," she said softly. "Please. Just listen." The way she said my name felt different, like it had a question mark at the end. I forced my legs to move and cross the room, every step heavy with the weight of years. Years of pretending not to notice my own reflection. Years of smoothing out any gesture that seemed too soft, too gentle, too wrong. The dress lay between us on the bedspread, its fabric catching the light in a way that made my chest ache. I could smell her jasmine lotion, the same scent that always clung to her shawls, and it suddenly felt like the room was shrinking, bringing every old fear closer. She touched my hand, just the lightest pressure, and I flinched more from emotion than surprise. "I've seen the way you look at yourself in the mirror," she said. "Not when you shave. Not when you're fixing your hair for work. Those other moments, when you think I'm not watching." My stomach dropped. My mind scrambled for explanations, stress, vanity, some harmless quirk, but they sounded empty even in my own head. She went on gently. "You stare like you're searching for someone who isn't there. And then you look away, like you're afraid of them." Heat flooded my face as memories flashed across my mind. Late nights in the bathroom with the door locked, tilting my head and wondering why my reflection felt like a half-finished sketch. The odd, private sense of longing when I saw certain clothes on shop mannequins, imagining for a heartbeat how it would feel if those colors, those lines, belonged to me. I had always bundled those moments into a box labeled nonsense and shoved it far into the back of my mind. "It's not like that," I murmured, but even I could hear the uncertainty thinning my denial. She paused, then reached behind her to pick something up from the bedside table. It was a small oval hand mirror with a silver frame. A cheap one we had bought from a street stall years ago. She held it up between us like an offering. "This," she said, "has been your enemy for too long." The mirror caught my face, slightly distorted by the angle, and for a second I wanted to push it away. I didn't want to look. I never really wanted to look, not when it was quiet, not when my defenses were down. She must have seen the panic in my eyes, because her voice softened even further. "What do you see when you look at yourself, really?" I swallowed, the words tangling in my throat. In the glass I saw the version of me everyone knew. Neat beard, tired eyes, the lines on my forehead carved deeper by office stress and unspoken confusion. I saw a man who knew how to fix a flickering tube light, but not the buzzing in his own head. "I see me," I said finally, though the statement landed in the room with a thud of dishonesty. "Your husband." Even as I said it, part of me flinched at how flat it sounded, like I was reading from a script that didn't quite fit. Her fingers tightened around the mirror frame. "I see my husband," she agreed. "But I also see someone who is exhausted from pretending. Someone who smiles at everyone else and never really smiles at themselves." She set the mirror down beside the dress, as if drawing a line between the reflection and the possibility. "I don't know exactly what's inside you," she admitted. "But I know there's more than what you've allowed yourself to be." There was no accusation in her tone, only a quiet, determined tenderness that both frightened and comforted me. My chest felt oddly hollow, as if my ribs were a cage someone had just unlocked without warning. "You're overthinking this," I said, though I wasn't sure whether I was talking to her or to myself. "This is just a phase. Curiosity. I'm tired. Work has been." The excuses piled up so fast they almost tripped over one another. Meanwhile, that small, secret part of me, usually so quiet, had started whispering urgently. "She sees you. She actually sees you." My hands trembled in my lap, betraying the earthquake I was trying to hide. She reached out and brushed her thumb over my knuckles, grounding me. "Then let's treat it like curiosity," she said. "No promises. No labels. Just you trying something, with me here. If you hate it, we stop. If it feels wrong, we stop. But if there's a chance it might feel like relief." She let the word hang in the air like a fragile lantern. "Don't you want to know?" The question punched straight through my defenses. Relief. The idea of it felt almost dangerous, like stepping too close to the edge of a high balcony. I stared at the dress, then at the mirror, then at my wife. The woman who had shared my life, my home, my bed, but never this hidden fracture in my identity. Shame burned just beneath my skin, hot and sharp, and yet underneath it there was something else, something gentler. A quiet, persistent longing to see myself differently, to step outside the tight little box I had folded myself into. "What if this changes everything?" I whispered. The question sounded too big for the room, too heavy for my unsteady voice. Her eyes glistened, but she did not look away. "Maybe it's time everything changed," she replied. "Maybe it's time you stop surviving as half of yourself." She picked up the dress carefully, like she was lifting something sacred, and held it out to me. The fabric swayed slightly in the breeze from the fan, and for a second I imagined it was breathing. "I'm not trying to turn you into someone else," she added quickly. "I'm trying to help you meet the person you've been avoiding." My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Old fears flared up like alarms. What would people say? What would my family think? What would this do to our marriage? To my job? The world outside our bedroom felt like 1,000 watchful eyes, all ready to judge, to mock, to reject. But here, in this room, it was just the two of us and the mirror and the dress. And the question of who I really was pressing in from all sides. My fingers twitched towards the fabric, then curled back into a fist. "I don't even know where to start," I said helplessly. It felt like admitting defeat, like confessing that the person everyone thought I was had never truly fit. She smiled, a small, steady curve of the lips that I had seen on our wedding day when I fumbled with the ring. "That's okay," she said. "We start right here." She glanced at the mirror and then back at me. "Let's see who shows up when you stop hiding from your own reflection." As the words settled between us, I realized for the first time that the mirror had always been more than glass and silver. It had been a silent judge, a gatekeeper, a reminder of the role I was expected to play. Now, in my wife's hands, it felt like something else. A doorway I was terrified to walk through and yet somehow drawn towards. My throat tightened again, but this time there were tears burning behind my eyes, blurring the edges of everything. The dress, the room, even her face. "And if I don't like what I see?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She shook her head gently. "Then we keep looking," she said. "Until you do." I'll continue the story from exactly where we left off, and keep the tone, pacing, and cleanliness the same. Part 2. Her words stayed in the air, soft but immovable, like a promise I didn't know how to accept. "Until you do." The certainty in her voice unsettled me almost as much as it comforted me. I had spent so long being unsure of everything inside me that her quiet confidence felt almost unreal, like a dream I might wake up from at any moment. I blinked hard, trying to chase away the sting in my eyes, but the tears refused to be bullied back. One slipped free and traced a slow, unfamiliar path down my cheek, and I watched it fall in the reflection of the mirror lying beside us. Without a word, she picked up the mirror again and angled it so I could see myself more clearly. My face, already too serious on normal days, now looked cracked open, eyes shining, lips trembling, that single line of moisture carving an honest confession across my skin. I could not remember the last time I had watched myself cry. Usually, if it happened at all, it was in the shower, drowned under the sound of running water, where I could pretend it was just the steam stinging my eyes. Now there was no such shelter. The mirror offered no escape, only a vivid, intimate replay of my own vulnerability. "There," she said quietly. "That's you too." It struck me then how much I had edited myself, even from my own gaze. I used to straighten my posture in front of mirrors, adjusting my jaw, my expression, my entire presence to match some invisible checklist. Strong, composed, masculine, in control. Never soft. Never uncertain. Never delicate. The man in the glass had always been a performance. The person in the mirror now felt less like a character, and more like a raw, unedited draft. "I look broken," I murmured, ashamed of the thickness in my voice. She shook her head slowly. "You look honest," she replied. "And honesty isn't broken. It's just fragile at first." She lowered the mirror, then held the dress up between us again, letting it flow from her hands like a ripple of sky-colored water. "Will you try?" she asked. "Not for me. For you." Those last two words landed like a soft knock on a locked door in my chest. Fear pressed in from every angle, but curiosity wove through it like a warning light refusing to turn off. I nodded once, the movement small but monumental, like the first step onto a bridge I hadn't checked for cracks. My fingers reached out slowly this time, brushing the fabric. It was smoother than I expected, almost cool at first, then warming quickly under my touch. A strange shiver moved through me, a mixture of dread and anticipation, as if every nerve in my body had suddenly woken up. She smiled again, not triumphantly, but with a kind of deep relief, as though she had been holding her breath for years, and was only now beginning to exhale. "Okay," she said softly. "We'll go step by step." She rose from the bed and moved with gentle practicality, closing the curtains just enough to soften the sunlight while still letting it spill into the room like a hushed blessing. My heart pounded harder as the outside world grew dimmer. The sounds from the street, horns, voices, the distant rattle of a motorbike, muting into a distant hum. It was like we were building a cocoon around this moment. She walked to my side of the room and opened the wardrobe, sifting through my neatly arranged shirts and trousers. Everything in there felt like a uniform, plain, safe, the colors of blending in. Beige, navy gray. She pulled out a simple white undershirt and a pair of soft leggings she had bought by mistake a few weeks ago, claiming they didn't fit her quite right. I had accepted the explanation without thinking, but now the memory clicked into place like a puzzle piece. Maybe it hadn't been a mistake at all. "I thought these might work," she said lightly, as if we were choosing an outfit for a casual evening out. "You can change in the bathroom if you want." The offer of privacy was a lifeline but also a test. Did I want to hide, even from her, in this most delicate of transformations? Or did I dare to let her witness all of it? The awkwardness and the fear and the unknown? My instinct screamed for secrecy, lock the door, turn off the light, wear the new pieces in silence, but the look in her eyes kept me rooted to the spot. "No," I said after a moment, surprising myself. "Stay." The word left my mouth with a quiet finality. If I was going to do this, I didn't want to feel like I was sneaking around in my own home, in my own life. I had hidden enough. She nodded once, as if she understood more than I had said. Then she turned away respectfully, facing the wardrobe so I could have a little space while still knowing she was there. My hands felt clumsy as I unbuttoned my shirt. Each button slipping free felt like a tiny admission. I am letting go just a little. I folded the shirt and placed it on the chair as I always did, the familiar gesture oddly grounding. Stripped down to my undershirt and trousers, I suddenly became hyper-aware of my own body. Its angles, its lines, the way my shoulders sloped, the way my waist narrowed more than I had ever publicly acknowledged. I had always told myself I was just slim, brushing away any thought that didn't fit neatly into that label. I slipped out of my trousers and into the soft leggings she had chosen. The material hugged my legs in a way that felt both unsettling and strangely right, tracing shapes I had always softened in my mind, avoiding anything that suggested grace instead of bluntness. Standing there in the leggings and undershirt, I felt exposed, not because I was revealing more skin, but because I was revealing a different outline of myself, one that hinted at possibilities I had long forbidden. "You okay?" she asked gently, still turned away. I swallowed, trying to assemble an honest answer. I don't know, I admitted. I feel like I'm meeting myself for the first time and I'm not sure I like the awkward silence. She gave a quiet, understanding laugh. Awkward silences are still honest, she said. We can fill them slowly. When I was ready, she turned back towards me. Her gaze swept over me, not appraising, not critical, just taking me in. For a second, embarrassment flared so hot I wanted to grab my old trousers and retreat. But her expression stayed steady and warm. You already look different, she said softly. Not because of the clothes, but because you're allowing yourself to be seen. I didn't know how to reply to that, so I just took a small, shaky breath and nodded. Then came the dress. She held it open for me, like she had on our wedding day when she helped adjust the stiff new sherwani on my shoulders. Back then, I had stood straight and dutiful, repeating all the lines of what a groom was supposed to be. Now, stepping towards the blue fabric, my movements felt hesitant, almost reverent. I slipped my arms through, letting the dress fall over me. For a moment, I felt nothing but the unfamiliar weight and flow of it. And then slowly, something inside me shifted. The fabric settled against my frame, soft where my shirts had always been firm, fluid where they had been structured. It skimmed instead of clung, traced instead of boxed in. I could feel it swaying gently when I moved, responding to the smallest shift in my posture, as if it was listening to me. A quiet, stunned silence stretched between us while I adjusted to the sensation of being draped instead of framed. Look, she whispered, reaching for the mirror again. My stomach clenched, but I didn't protest as she lifted it. The reflection staring back at me was both entirely me and somehow not. The beard, the familiar features, the messy hair, still there. But now, the line of the dress softened everything around them. The severe angles that once dominated my outline were blurred by the curve of the neckline. The gentle fall of the fabric, the way the color brought out a warmth in my skin, I had never noticed. I didn't look like the woman from any fantasy or magazine. I didn't look like some polished vision of femininity. I looked like a person caught mid-metamorphosis, halfway between two unspoken truths. And yet, for the first time, I recognized something in my own eyes. A flicker of relief, fragile but bright. It was as if the mirror, so often my adversary, had finally paused its criticism and was simply listening. My throat thickened. I look strange, I said. But the word carried no contempt, only wonder and confusion. She tilted her head thoughtfully. You look like someone who has been holding their breath for years, and has finally let a little air in. Her voice broke just slightly. You look beautiful to me, because you look real. The word beautiful startled me more than anything else. It was a description I had never dared to associate with myself. It had always belonged to others, to her, to actresses on screens, to women passing by on the street with an ease of movement I never allowed myself. I wanted to argue, to reject the compliment before it could sink in, but the mirror wouldn't let me. It showed me a person I could not easily categorize, a person whose presence disrupted the old script, who did not fit into the neat, familiar labels I had grown up clinging to. For a second, panic surged. If I didn't know what box to put myself in, how was the rest of the world supposed to know what to do with me? I'm scared, I admitted quietly, the words escaping before I could swallow them. I don't know what this makes me. I don't know what it makes us. The fear wasn't just about the dress. It was about the fault line it revealed running through my carefully ordered life. Would people laugh? Would they be cruel? Would I lose friends? Family? Would my wife one day look at me and realize she had signed up for someone completely different? She moved closer, standing behind me so that our reflections appeared side by side in the mirror. Her in her comfortable home clothes, me in the blue dress, the soft leggings, the strange in-between. She wrapped her arms gently around my waist, her chin resting on my shoulder. The contact steadied me, tethering me to something solid in the midst of the identity storm crashing through my mind. Do you trust me? She asked, her voice a careful, steady thread. Yes, I answered without hesitation, because that much had never been in doubt. Trust had always been the quiet backbone of our marriage, the thing that survived every argument, every disappointment, every long day. She nodded against my shoulder. Then trust that we'll figure out the words later, she said. Trust that I'm still here, that we're still us. For now, just feel. It was such a simple instruction, and yet it sounded more difficult than any exam I had ever taken. So I tried. I let the questions hover in the background and focused instead on the present moment. The weight of the dress, the whisper of fabric when I shifted my feet, the warmth of her hands resting lightly on me, the unfamiliar but not unwelcome sight of myself in the mirror. A spark of something, not quite joy, not quite peace, but their distant cousins, flickered in my chest, surprising and fragile. It hurt a little, like using a muscle that had been cramped for too long. A thought tiptoed into my mind, almost shy. If you saw this person, I asked slowly, watching my own reflection, and you didn't know them, what would you think? It felt dangerous, asking her to judge the very image I was so unsure about. She studied the mirror for a long moment, her gaze steady, her brows soft. I would think, she said carefully, that they are braver than they realize, that they are standing at the edge of something important, and that they deserve kindness while they figure out who they are. The words sank into me like rain into dry ground. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe her, just a little. Then, like a crack of thunder splitting the intimacy of the room, my phone buzzed loudly on the bedside table, the sound jarring in the hush we had built. I jumped, startled, the spell broken. My wife pulled back slightly as I reached for the phone, dread already curling in my stomach. The outside world, impatient and insistent, was calling. On the screen was a message from my younger cousin. A meme in the family group chat. A joke about men these days becoming too soft, followed by a storm of laughing emojis. It was nothing unusual, just the kind of casual comment I would normally scroll past or respond to with my own joking remark. But now, dressed as I was, standing where I stood, the words hit differently. A flush of shame and anger rushed through me, so fast it left me momentarily dizzy. As I stared at the screen, the room seemed to tilt. Suddenly, all the fears I had tried to push aside crashed back in a wave. What would they say if they saw me now? How quickly would those laughing emojis turn sharp, turn cruel? Would I become the joke? The story they told in low voices at weddings? The disappointment whispered about behind closed doors? My chest tightened, and the mirror, which had felt like a tentative ally a moment ago, now reflected a target. My wife watched me carefully, reading the storm in my face. "What is it?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, then handed her the phone. She read the message, her lips pressing into a thin line. For a brief moment, I wondered if she would laugh it off, tell me not to take it so seriously. Instead, she set the phone down with deliberate care, as though refusing to let it dominate the moment. "This is exactly why we're doing this in here first," she said. "Out there is noisy. Out there is full of people who joke about things they don't understand." She touched my arm gently. "In here, you get to be real before you decide how much of that reality the world deserves to see." Her words made sense, but shame still crackled under my skin, loud and insistent. What if I'm the joke they're already talking about and I don't even know it? I asked bitterly. What if I become the story no one says to my face? The fear wasn't new. It had always lurked in the background. The reason I kept every confusing feeling locked up tight. Now that the door had been cracked open, all those anxieties rushed out, demanding to be heard. She met my gaze in the mirror, her expression fierce in a way I rarely saw. "If anyone chooses to laugh at you for being honest about who you are," she said firmly, "that says everything about them and nothing about your worth." Then her voice softened again. "But we don't have to decide anything today. Today, all you need to do is breathe in this version of yourself and see how it feels." I took a shaky breath, then another, watching my chest rise and fall in the mirror. The dress moved with me, a small, visible echo of my internal struggle. I realized then that the mirror, that simple object that had haunted me for years, was becoming something else entirely. It was no longer just a surface showing me what I was supposed to be. It was becoming a witness, silent, reflective, and for the first time strangely patient. I looked into my own eyes, really looked, and whispered so softly I almost didn't hear myself. "Who are you?" The question hung there, not accusing, not demanding, just waiting. And for the first time in my life, I allowed myself not to have an immediate answer. For a second, neither of us moved. The familiar sounds from downstairs, doors closing, footsteps on the stairwell, a distant laugh, suddenly felt like approaching sirens. My pulse thudded in my ears. I could almost see it. The door swinging open, my sister-in-law stepping into the room. Her gaze snagging on the blue dress, the earrings, the half-done version of me that I wasn't ready for anyone to see. The mirror, which had felt like a private witness, now seemed like evidence. My wife's fingers flew across her phone screen. "I'll tell her to leave the things with the gatekeeper," she said quickly. Her voice was calm, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She typed a message, hit send, then waited, the silence between each buzzing second stretching thin. I held my breath, hands clenched at my sides, feeling utterly exposed even though the door was still closed and locked. A moment later, her phone vibrated with a reply. She exhaled, shoulders dropping. "She says it's fine," my wife murmured. "She'll just leave them downstairs." Relief washed over me so quickly my knees almost gave out. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding, but the aftershocks of panic trembled through me, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. The threat had passed, but the fear it unleashed lingered, a stark reminder of how fragile this little bubble of safety really was. I turned back to the mirror and saw it there. The raw terror still etched into my features. The dress now looked less like a possibility and more like a risk wrapped around my body. In that reflection, I saw what the world might see if it barged in uninvited. A man out of place, a story ready to be twisted into gossip. Shame rose hot and fast, burning away the fragile calm we had built. "I can't do this outside this room," I blurted, the words tumbling over each other. "I can't imagine walking to the door like this. I can't imagine anyone else knowing. It's too much. I'm not brave enough." My throat tightened around the last words, making them sound almost like an apology. I felt suddenly foolish, like a child who had snuck into a costume box and now feared being caught. My wife stepped closer, but she didn't rush to contradict me. "Okay," she said quietly. "Then we don't do it outside this room. Not now. Maybe not ever, if you decide that's what you want." Her acceptance startled me. I had expected a speech about courage, about authenticity, about not caring what people thought. Instead, she simply acknowledged my fear and made space for it. "This isn't a test you pass by walking down the street in a dress," she added softly. "It's not about proving anything to anyone." Her gaze flicked to the mirror, then back to me. "The bravest thing you've done today is look at yourself honestly. That's more than most people ever do, no matter what they wear." There was no drama in her tone, no exaggerated encouragement, just quiet conviction. It made my eyes sting again, though I was tired of crying. "I feel ridiculous," I muttered, hating the vulnerability in my voice. One minute I thought I saw something real in the mirror, and the next I'm ready to rip this off and pretend it never happened. I gripped the hem of the dress unconsciously, fingers digging into the fabric. The mirror caught that gesture, too. Someone holding on and wanting to let go at the same time. "That's not ridiculous," she said. "That's what fear does. It rushes in as soon as you get close to something true, and it starts bargaining. Forget it. Go back. You were safer before." She stepped behind me again, but this time she didn't change anything about my appearance. She just rested her hands lightly on my shoulders. "You're allowed to be afraid," she continued. "You're allowed to not know what you want yet. And you're allowed to decide what stays private and what doesn't." Her words eased something knotted inside me, but they didn't erase the ache. "I keep thinking about my parents," I admitted, my voice low. "About my father's face if he ever found out. About my mother trying to smooth it over with forced jokes or nervous prayers. I can't picture a reality where they see me like this and still look at me the same way." The thought alone felt like a weight on my chest. She was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe they never will see you like this," she said eventually. "And that might hurt, but it might also protect you for now." Her hands squeezed my shoulders gently. "You don't know the whole world, every part of yourself. Not all at once. Not even ever, if that's not safe for you." She moved to stand beside me again, eyes meeting mine in the glass. "What matters is that you don't keep hiding from yourself." I took that in slowly. The idea that my own self-knowledge did not have to equal immediate public exposure seemed so simple, and yet it was something I had never allowed myself to consider. In my mind, it had always been all or nothing. Either I kept everything buried or I ripped my life open in one irreversible move. But here, in this room with my wife and the mirror, there was a third path. Gradual, cautious, honest at a pace my heart could survive. Still, the fear hummed under my skin. What if this is just some phase? I asked weakly. What if I'm making it bigger than it is? Dressing up, trying on earrings, staring at myself in the mirror like I'm rewriting my whole life. And then I wake up next week and feel nothing. What if I drag you through all of this for nothing? The guilt in that thought cut almost as sharply as the fear of being seen. She tilted her head thoughtfully. If it's a phase, she said slowly, then it's a phase you needed. A chapter you had to live through to get to the next one. That doesn't make it meaningless. She offered a small smile. You think I haven't gone through my own phases? Questioning my career, my faith, my place in this family, even my idea of what a good wife is supposed to be. Her eyes softened. Loving someone means being willing to sit with them in their unfinished sentences, not just in their final drafts. Her metaphor hit me hard. Unfinished sentences. That was exactly how I felt. Like a thought that had been cut off midway and left hanging in the air for years. The dress, the mirror, the earrings, they weren't the answer. They were an attempt at continuing that sentence, one word at a time. I turned slightly, studying my reflection with that framework in mind. I still didn't recognize a fully formed person in the glass. I saw fragments. The careful curve of the dress, the shy gleam of silver at my ears, the old, familiar eyes now carrying a new, unsettling light. Maybe I was not supposed to recognize a complete self yet. Maybe that was the point. Do you like her? I asked my wife quietly, not taking my eyes off the mirror. This version of me? Or does she feel like a stranger in your house? The question cracked something tender open in my chest. I braced myself for a measured answer, something diplomatic and kind. Instead, she laughed softly, the sound thick with emotion. I like that she makes you softer with yourself, she said. I like that she lets you stand a little less stiff, that your shoulders look like they're finally allowed to drop. She brushed a loose strand of hair from my forehead. I like that she looks at me like she trusts me with a part of you that no one else has seen. Her voice wavered. So yes, I like her. Very much. I swallowed around a lump in my throat. I still don't know what to call her, I whispered. Sometimes I'm not even sure she's me. The pronoun felt risky every time it left my mouth, as if I were borrowing something sacred without permission. But the more I used it in the privacy of this room, the less impossible it felt. We don't have to rush that, she reminded me. Today we've already done enough. More than enough. She glanced at the clock on the wall, and I realized with a jolt how much time had passed. The room was bathed in a softer, late afternoon light now, shadows stretching gently across the floor. What had felt like a single breath had been hours of silent battles and small victories. The thought of returning to my normal clothes made my stomach twist. It felt like erasing everything that had just happened. And yet part of me craved the safety of that old uniform. The simple shield of trousers and shirts, the anonymity of blending back into a version of myself that required no explanations. You don't have to decide alone, my wife said, reading the turmoil on my face. If you want to change back now, we can. If you want to stay like this a little longer, we can. If you want to take a picture, or write something down so you don't forget how this felt, we can do that too. She gestured to the mirror. What do you need right now in this moment? It took me a long time to answer. Finally, I said, I need to know that if I take this off, I'm not killing her. That she can exist even when I'm back in a shirt and trousers. That this isn't all or nothing. The fear of losing this fragile version of myself was almost as strong as the fear of showing her to the world. My wife nodded, her expression turning thoughtful. Then we give her something that stays, she said. Something small. Something no one else has to notice unless you want them to. She considered me for a second. Then her gaze dropped to my hands. Gently, she took my left hand and turned it palm up. Do you remember my old ring? She asked softly. The one that didn't fit right after we got married, so I stopped wearing it? I nodded. It had been a delicate, simple band, overshadowed by the more formal jewelry of our wedding. I hadn't seen it in years. She stepped away, opened her jewelry box again, and came back with the thin silver ring resting in her palm. It caught the light hesitantly, as if unsure it was meant to shine anymore. I kept it, she said. I told myself I was being sentimental. Maybe I was waiting for this moment without knowing it. Carefully, she slipped the ring onto the middle finger of my right hand. It fit a little loosely, but it stayed put. The metal was cool at first, then warmed quickly against my skin. There, she murmured. Even if you change back, even if you walk out of this room looking like everyone expects you to look, you'll still have this. A promise to yourself that what happened here was real. That she is real. Even if she's quiet. I stared at the ring, then at my reflection. It was such a small detail, barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't looking for it. And yet it felt like an anchor, a physical echo of the person trembling nervously in the mirror. The recurrence of silver, at my ears and my hand, in the frame of the mirror, suddenly struck me. It was as if these small, shining things were stitching together a story I had been too afraid to tell. My chest tightened with a new, sharp emotion. Not quite joy, not quite sorrow, but something bittersweet that tasted like the first breath after a long time underwater. I nodded slowly. Okay, I whispered. I'll keep it on. It felt like accepting a secret handshake from myself. Do you want me to leave you alone for a few minutes? My wife asked. To say goodbye to this moment in your own way? The offer was so tender it undid me all over again. I nodded, afraid that if I tried to speak, my voice would fracture completely. She pressed a gentle kiss to my temple. Call me when you're ready, she said, and then she slipped quietly out of the room, closing the door with a soft click that somehow made the silence feel even more personal. Left alone at last, I turned fully towards the mirror. No witnesses. No one to interpret my expressions. Just me and the reflection I had spent years avoiding and had finally, for a fleeting afternoon, begun to explore. The earrings glinted softly. The dress hung gently. The ring shone faintly on my finger, a subtle circle of light. I stepped closer until I could see every line in my face, every fleck in my eyes. The person staring back had all my history, but carried something new in their gaze. A depth of unearthed questions and a tenderness I had never allowed myself. I didn't know if I was looking at a man, a woman, or some truth that slipped between those words like water between fingers. Maybe I didn't need to know. Not today. I lifted my hand, fingers trembling, and laid my palm against the cool glass, lining it up with my reflection's hand. For a second, it felt like touching someone else entirely. Someone I had been running from and towards at the same time. I don't know who you are yet, I whispered to the figure in the mirror. But I promise I won't keep pretending you don't exist. My reflection, of course, said nothing. But the promise lingered in the air, settling into the silver frame, the blue fabric, the thin ring on my finger like another quiet piece of truth I could no longer unknow.